All right, sexual motivation, video 3 of the motivation unit. Let's get going right here. The human sexual response cycle normally follows a pattern of excitement, plateau, orgasm, which seems to involve similar feelings and brain activity in males and females, and then resolution. And in males, resolution is followed by a refractory period, during which the renewed arousal and orgasm are not possible. The sex hormones direct the physical development of male and female sex characteristics, and especially in non-human animals, activate sexual behavior. Although testosterone and estrogens, such as estriadol, are present in both sexes, males have a higher level of testosterone and females a higher level of estrogen. In humans, the hormones influence sexual behaviors more loosely, especially once sufficient hormone levels are present. In later life, sex hormones decline, and the frequency of sexual fantasies and intercourse also decline. External stimuli, such as sexually explicit materials, can trigger arousal in both men and women, although the activated brain areas will differ somewhat. Sexually coercive material tends to increase viewers' acceptance of rape and violence toward women. And images of sexually attractive men and women may lead people to devalue their own partners and relationships. Our imaginations also influence sexual motivation. About 95% of both men and women say they have had sexual fantasies, and fantasizing about sex does not indicate a sexual problem or dissatisfaction. If anything, sexually active people have more sexual fantasies. Although physical maturation fosters a sexual dimension to adolescents' emerging identity, sexual expression varies greatly with time and culture. Compared with European teens, American teens have a lower rate of contraceptive use and thus a higher pregnancy and abortion rate. And reasons for this failure may include a lack of knowledge about sex and sexual health, and a tendency to overestimate the sexual activities of our friends. Guilt related to sexual activity sometimes results in lack of planned birth control. When passion overwhelms intentions, the results may be conception. Often there is minimal communication about birth control, as many teenagers are uncomfortable discussing contraception with either their parents or their partners. Sexually active teens also tend to use alcohol, and this can break down normal restraints. Finally, television and movies foster sexual norms of unprotected promiscuity. Unprotected sex has led to the increased rates of sexually transmitted infections, or STIs. Teenage girls, because of their less mature biological development and lower levels of protective antibodies, seem especially vulnerable to STIs. Attempts to protect teens through comprehensive sex education programs include a greater emphasis on teen abstinence. Teens with high rather than average intelligence more often delay sex. Religiosity, father presence, and participation in service learning programs are also predictors of sexual restraint in teenagers. Sexual orientation is our enduring sexual attraction toward members of either our own sex, which is homosexual, or the other sex, which is heterosexual. Studies in both Europe and United States suggest that about 3 or 4% of men and 1 to 2% of women are homosexual. Estimates derived from the sex of unmarried partners reported in the 2000 U.S. Census suggest that 2.5% of the population is gay or lesbian. Such studies also tell us that sexual orientation is enduring. Women's sexual orientation tends to be less strongly felt and potentially more fluid and changing than men's, and women are somewhat more likely than men to feel and act on bisexual attractions. There is no evidence that environmental influences determine sexual orientation. No links have ever been found between homosexuality and a child's relationships with their parents. Father-absent homes, fear or hatred of people of the other gender, levels of sex hormones currently in the blood, or childhood sexual experience. On the other hand, biological influences are evident in studies of same-sex relations in several hundred species, straight-gay differences in body and brain characteristics, genetic studies of family members and twins, and the effect of exposure to certain hormones during critical periods of prenatal development. Men who have older brothers are also somewhat more likely to be gay, about 1/3 more likely for each older brother, and the reason for this phenomenon, which is called the fraternal birth order effect, is unclear. Because the physiological evidence is preliminary and controversial, some scientists remain skeptical. Rather than specifying sexual orientation, they suggest biological factors may predispose a temperament that influences sexuality in the context of individual learning and experience.